Okay, welcome to this very first inaugural episode of, what should we even call it? I just realized now we don't even have a name for this. I was just going to roll with the WMMA edition of the Fight Plug. This is going to be our women's mixed martial arts centric version of the Fight Plug podcast. Mike and I, what are you grinning about already? What?
Nothing. I'm just like thinking names.
Yeah, I've found that. Well, for one, I mean, Brandon likes to joke around, but he's not as into the women's fights as we are. But he also doesn't hate them either. But it's kind of tough to cover both because I tend to try and keep the episodes to about an hour to an hour and a half, and a lot of times WMMA fights of intrigue end up being kind of the curtain jerkers, like, you know, early on in the cards. And sure, there's still plenty of main card appeal for certain women's fights also, but it does begin to be a little bit of like a juggling act to kind of give them the breakdown that I really want to give them, because sometimes I could break them down more than I can break down some of the men's fights.
Yeah. And
I feel like kind of splitting the episodes and doing the regular MMA and the WMMA episodes separately will give us a chance to kind of like dive in a little bit. And then also, yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be cool. I like chopping it up with you, and I like to hear what you kind of have, or what you're willing to go on the record with, because I've tried to get you to bet so many times, and you barely ever touch any bets. Like, even for picks that you're very confident for, I'm like, oh, cool, let's put $5 on it just for fun. It's $5, and you're like, nah. It's like, there's been so many times when I've been very, very confident that you would take a $5 bet, and you're just like, no. And it's like, okay. But anyways, to give you your proper introduction, he's been on the podcast before, Mike Gonzalez. We got the same last name, different last letter. You've been on, 3 times now. So, but yes, we're venturing into new territory here. Brandon's not going anywhere. By the time anybody is listening to this episode, you probably will have already heard the episode just before this, which is Brandon and I breaking down and recapping a lot of stuff. Actually, we talked about Francis Ngannou signing with the PFL, a lot of big fight announcements in the MMA world, a lot of good stuff. But we figured this would be the perfect card to kick off this format of our program. UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Hill, a rare fight card where there's 4 WMMA fights, and they're like spread out all over the card. We have a headliner, we have another one on the main event, another one on the main card, and it's just all over the place, different levels. Each fight has at least one girl that we were very interested in, whether it's because they're a long-time vet or they're a relative newcomer, and we're still excited to see them ascend through the division. So yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about in terms of WMMA here. I do have to ask you though, do you want to go back and do any kind of a recap for the WMMA fights that we had on the previous card? We're talking Mandy, Bohm, Ji-Yoon Kim, all of that good stuff. I know you shook you're muted, I think.
I was going to say no, just because, I mean, I saw that fight. I don't remember what else was on the card.
It was Jessica Rose Clark.
That's right.
And Lisboa, the debuting Lisboa, which wasn't a bad fight.
It was only 2, right?
Yeah, it was just those 2.
Okay. Yeah. I guess we could go back if it's only 2.
Here's the thing.
For some reason, I thought it was more.
I watched the Lisboa Jessica Rose Clark fight, and because that one, I was working. I work Saturday mornings because your boy needs to stack that yaper. So this is one of the rare cards where I wasn't going to be able to watch, but I did manage to watch that fight because they had it on in the break room. So I was like, holy shit, okay, cool. Perfect timing.
1 second, Kenny?
Sure.
Put a pause right here. 1 second.
Oh, straight up pause. Calling for a pause. All right. Editing pause.
All right. I'm back.
Welcome back. Okay. Let's see. What was I even saying when you left now? Oh, my bad. All right. Welcome back. Let's see. What was I even saying before you left? I don't recall.
You were just talking about how you were working, trying to stack that paper.
So,
And,
Yaper, trying to stack that Yaper.
And you had caught the. You ended up having to watch the JRC fight later and the other one.
Correct. I did.
I figured let's go back and let's recap it because I think there's only two, but there's also some discussion to be had
regarding rules and fouls.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I still haven't watched the Mandy Bohm Ji Yoon Kim fight.
Oh, really?
I tried to go back and watch it, but it's not available on my preferred website to rewatch fights on. That shall remain unnamed. It's been removed, so haven't been able to find a copy. It sounds like I don't maybe want to rewatch this fight or watch this fight. Got some pretty bad reviews. But you were giving me a pretty thorough play-by-play of some of the drama that was unfolding in the cage between Ji Yoon Kim and Mandy Bohm. The fight ends in a technical split decision where Mandy Bohm wins 28-27, I believe it was, after Ji Yoon Kim had 2 points deducted for fouls. And it sounded...
And 1 point coming after the fight had already been stopped.
Had already been called off. Yeah, and the ref still decides, I'm going to take another one.
I didn't know that you could do that. But
I wasn't aware either, but realistically, I don't even know if the officials know. So I don't know. I don't think anybody was even if it wasn't the case where that's allowed, I wouldn't be surprised if nobody in the room was confident enough to be like, hey, that's not allowed. But either way, a really weird outcome to a fight that I was kind of looking forward to watching. I kind of had hopes that Mandy Bohm would kind of pull it together. When she first came to the UFC, she was 7-0, and I was like kind of intrigued and thought maybe she might get some momentum going. Has failed to kind of like to do exactly that, and this is technically her first win in the UFC, but not the way anybody wants to get a win.
She didn't look good. I mean, Kim was winning the fight the whole way. It went to a technical split decision. It went to the technical decision. She got 2 points taken away, and one judge still had her winning.
Tough look. Rough one.
And so I remember when I heard that decision got announced, I was like, yo, you got 2 points taken away and it's still a split, like, and you're celebrating that you won. Like, no. Like, put your hands down. And she didn't look good at all. Kim, from what I recall, dominated the fight. I was getting ready at the time, so I was kind of like watching it on and off, but
I see.
Yeah, but I mean, what led to the technical decision, the knee to the head, having 3 points of contact on the mat. So essentially 2 feet are posted on the floor and you're leaning over with one hand onto the mat, which makes you a downed opponent for those that aren't aware. So it's not her on her knees or anything, and Kim just kind of blasted her with that knee. When I first saw it, I thought it was like close. It looked like the fingertips were coming off, and it just looked like it was like one of those like really kind of playing the game type things.
Right.
Like, I'm down, no, I'm not. And she had the fingertips down. It was definitely fingertips, like all the way, but it's just. It should be legal.
Does Mandy Bohm have to pay the cheese tax for the gamesmanship because we've talked about that specific position, and then also coming off the heels of the recent Aljamain Sterling Henry Cejudo fight, where not too much controversy there. I had Aljamain Sterling winning, but a lot of people took note about his method of disengaging from certain positions on the ground, where he was literally on all fours, kind of like shuffling backwards, moving his head side to side. A bit of gamesmanship because, as you mentioned, for people who maybe aren't so in touch with the rules. Ground opponent, no knees to the head allowed.
No kicks.
And no kicks to the head allowed either, correct. And this is something we've both kind of discussed about, like kind of wanted to see a change for in the past. And we're not going to go so far, or at least I won't. I don't know about you. I won't go so far as to be like, okay, I also want soccer kicks to the head and stomps or none of that stuff. Like, it doesn't need to go that far. But I really do think that there's a case that needs to be made that if nothing else, maybe we should be taking a look at the positioning. Because if they're steadfast and saying like, no, you know, it would, or if someone says, listen, it would just take too much work to try and get them to change it across the board and implement it in the unified rules, fine. We won't have knees to the head of grounded opponent, but I think we need to take a long look at what constitutes a truly grounded opponent. That's always been my biggest problem, and I've said it in another episode of the regular podcast before, this idea that a fighter can be on both feet and reaching down and touching the ground with their fingertips, and that's called grounded. Like, if you walked into a room and you saw somebody in that exact same position, just like standing there but reaching down and touching the ground, you wouldn't then go and say, hey, that guy's on the floor, hey, what are you doing on the floor, get up off the floor. Like, that's a guy just touching the ground. And then also my other like big retort to it also is that if we're talking in wrestling terms, that wouldn't be a takedown. Like, if you're in the middle of a scramble with somebody and you have them in that position, the commentary, the ref, the judge, no one's going to look at it and be like, oh, the fingers are touching the ground, that's a down fighter, he got him down. That's a six. So yeah, it's kind of funny how that position only is considered a grounded opponent only in the context of whether or not knees are going to be allowed, and I kind of hate it. I've always said, hey, I think it should be 2 knees down, not even 1 knee, both knees, and it's like, okay, that's a grounded opponent, no knees to the head allowed, fine. Because if you're going to drop both knees, you're sacrificing some position, like you're putting yourself at risk. That's not telling me that you're like trying to get up off the floor, like you're well, you could be, but either way, that's much more committed to a grappling exchange.
It is, but at the same time, and I think this is probably starting to go off topic into general MMA as well, but when you look at sort of the techniques that are starting to be used in order to somewhat take advantage of that rule. So obviously you have Aljo, but I don't know if you caught the co-main event. Ended up catching the co-main event. Anthony Smith attempted the same thing, dropping to his knees, and did the trying to
the shuffle.
Do that. Yeah, and he did that a couple times during the fight, and if this is what the kind of the evolution or the next kind of thing we're taking advantage of in this next couple of years of MMA, then I don't know. Then that's where I think if you're counting just 2 knees down, I think you're probably, if you count 2 knees down as a grounded opponent, you're still going to see that.
So we're going to get a lot of that.
I think the problem that you got to solve is how are you going to prevent all of that, where it should be not necessarily just like stalling, but forcing somebody to have to move if they don't want to absorb damage. You don't get the breaks to rest or kind of think things through. It's like, all right, if you want to wrestle and be grounded, that's fine, but you have to be aware of this knee that could come at any time. And I'm with you, like, no soccer kicks or stomps. Like, I'm fine without that, but I really like the 1 FC rule set. I think it's something that should be looked at. Other places adopting. And honestly, I have a feeling that probably within the next 5 years, I think you might see them actually.
Guns, knives in the cage, weapons, like full.
No, like I really do, because I think if you start to see this kind of strategy get exploited, then I think you might start to see people calling for changes on that. But right now it's currently legal, and
time will tell.
It's a smart technique, or maybe it's going to be one of those techniques where looking back, we're like, I can't believe that worked for a period of time. That's
what I was going to say. It's one of those deals where, like, you do have to keep an eye on certain things to see if it's like, okay, maybe we should consider a rule change here. But I can tell you right now, if we're talking about it, there's guys actually competing in this sport in gyms all around the world that are looking at that, and coaches that are looking at it too, and being like, "Yo, why is nobody doing this when a guy does that?" So we could see the zag to that zig, and kind of like see what the response is to it, and we might see, because I mean, when I'm looking at that in the context of oh man, Brandon, if he listens to this, he's going to be so mad. He's like, you guys aren't fucking talking MMA, WMMA. But if we're talking about this in the context of Aljo and Sterling, because I saw that, and watching that, I'm thinking like, well, jump on his fucking back, Cejudo. Like, that's the issue. Because I mean, as far as like, if you're going to jump on someone's back while they're still on both feet and reaching down and touching the ground, that's way more risky, unless you got really good back control. But you could be shrugged off and dumped off over the top. Either way, though, it's something it is something that's happening more and more often, and whatever our take on it is, ultimately, I think we would both be very receptive to knees on the ground. That's knees to the head on the ground. I think, and for people who would hear that and be like, oh well, that's then you're shifting the meta of MMA more, to be anti-wrestler or whatever. Don't kid yourselves, people. Like, wrestlers will make the most use of knees to the head of a grounded opponent, because everyone's thinking about it in the context of like, well, the wrestler can just shoot, and if they fuck up and don't get, don't finish the takedown or the single or the double, then they can just do that and shimmy out. No, well, there's also going to be plenty more scenarios where a wrestler will have a guy inside mount, and he's going to start raining down knees to the head, and it's going to, and I think when people see enough of that, they might actually be like, maybe we need to go back. Honestly, I mean, it'll be brutal, but wrestlers will start spamming it for a window of time where I think people will seriously be considering that.
I guess my counterpoint to that, and again, apologies to Brandon, is if we go and look at the ONE FC rule set, they're legal there, but you're not seeing dudes just get absolutely blasted with them every single fight. Like, because they're legal, I think people are more aware of them, and they're more aware of their positioning and how they're going to get out of a certain position. So,
we need to see some more good old-fashioned corn-fed American wrestlers over there. See how that changes things.
Like it's obviously going to lead to some, finishes and stuff, but I just think what it does is it forces the action. It doesn't give somebody a chance to just kind of take a break. And like I said, forces somebody to move. And if you're being forced to move, then
it's going to create
spending energy,
openings.
And now you got to start, as a fighter and a coach, you got to start planning around, that in your game plan now. So
I think more than anything, I like the idea of introducing or changing the rule, because I'm for almost anything that is going to take away elements of gamesmanship, of people like trying to skirt the rule set in a way that just isn't fighting. Whereas, I'm in this position, I'm going to reach down and touch the ground so I can be safe. Like, that's not fighting at that point. Yeah. So
see, it's times like this too where I wish something like WEC was still around, because I feel if the UFC wanted to, split brands or something like that, I have a feeling that you could use something like that in order to test those rules and things like that, see how it works, and then adopt it into the UFC.
I had a dream that the WEC came back and they had women's fights.
That would be dope. But yeah, no, it's definitely something that's going to be, I think, looked into, and maybe we'll see what happens this weekend and in the following weeks as well. But
SpongeBob time cut 10 years later. Nothing has changed. No one's looked into nothing. It's business as usual. The PFL was purchased by the UFC.
But yeah, so that was the Yan, or not the Kim Bohm fight, and I mean, not much else to say about it.
And Ji-Yeon Kim has been cut by the UFC. I guess that's the last thing we could say about it. Mandy Bohm lives to fight another day inside the octagon. And
they were both fighting for their jobs.
Yeah. This next one, Mandy Bohm's back is going to be up against the fence a little bit. Get out of here. My cat's trying to get in on the action. You are not a co-host of this podcast, Beans.
I guess apparently, too, I remember catching the commentary saying that I guess the corner was frustrated with Kim because she wasn't listening to any of their instructions. So we'll see what happens. Maybe she switches to camps or something.
She was very emotional coming into this fight. I don't know if you saw the weigh-ins. The weigh-in stare down. She got in Mandy Bohm's face, and there was nothing audible. Like sometimes you get these main event stare downs and stuff, and you got somebody right in there with the camera to capture what's being said. But there was no footage where it was audible. But Jiyoon Kim very clearly said "fuck you" to Mandy Bohm, and I was like, "Holy shit! What happened? What's going on here?" I don't even know if they speak the same language, and there was fucking heat on that one. So
I mean, for what it's worth, Kim, despite all the bullshit that happened and that knee, which should be legal, Kim dominated the fight. Bohm won on paper, and Bohm will probably probably get a tough fight next fight. And
Maria Agapova, Bohm versus Agapova. I'm here for it, man. That's the fight I want to see.
But yeah, it was. That's not a way you want to take that first UFC win, and the crowd was definitely not behind that either. But yeah, so that was that fight. Then we had the JRC and the Lisboa fight. Well, let's cover that real fast. JRC, don't know if any news came out on that yet, but I think that's 3 in a row now. She's
also cut, by the way.
She got cut. Yeah, that's what I was figured. She was also pretty emotional after the fight. I know she was training hard for that fight and drew a tough opponent. Lisboa looked solid. I mean, a lot of instances of JRC rocking her pretty good. She would come in with her head straight up. So, but her striking was good. Probably a future top 15 fighter for sure. JRC, I guess you're going to probably Bellator or Invicta for a bit, maybe even PFL.
She's got options. I think she's going to get some offers for sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up back in the UFC in a couple of years. She's still young and has shown potential in her wins that she's had. So, I'm a fan of JRC. Tough loss, but like I said, she'll probably be back. So sometimes those cuts come back. They go out there and fight someplace else and come back as a demon. You never know.
Yeah. On the Lisboa side of things, nice to see that she's got some decent submission skills too. I mean, they were both purple belts coming into this fight. I know Lisboa comes from a Muay Thai background, and I don't know if you saw her fight with Valentina Shevchenko, or her Muay Thai fight. She got steamrolled. Val kept tossing her. And I guess some people were saying that the reason it was working so well, I guess, because they were supposedly illegal throws. They were saying that Valentina Shevchenko was using like a sanda throw or toss, which was illegal, but the ref wasn't doing anything about it, and she just kept dumping her and dumping her and dumping her. And not a great look. I probably would have been a little bit lower on Lisboa going into the fight if I had watched that before the JRC fight. But either way, she comes from Muay Thai, but she still has that purple belt, and she put it to use against JRC. And I mean, like asterisk, I guess a little bit. JRC's defense looked kind of bad. There was that armbar attempt, which kind of led into the finishing sequence where she kind of tried to like turn her hips to get that armbar and just whiffed it, just like didn't turn her hips fast enough and just failed. And now you're thinking from JRC's perspective, you should already know, like, oh, well, that's coming now. Like, she's trying to set up an armbar and she fucked it up. So now you're not going to get me in that armbar. And then she did. And then she just like 7 seconds later, she tries the exact same setup, and then she gets the armbar. And she didn't tap her with that armbar, but she managed to like lock it in for a bit and threaten with it. And so I kind of watched that, and I figured, okay, it's third round. JRC's probably huffing and puffing, so your submission defense isn't going to be what it should be, or not going to be anywhere near as good as it was in the first round. So. The more tools that Lisboa has in her tool bag, the better off she's going to be competing in this strawweight division. Was it a strawweight fight or a flyweight fight? I don't recall. JRC's a flyweight, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and there's more. I feel like there's more grapplers at flyweight right now. So I mean that's good for her. But let's go ahead and move it on over to UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Hill, and dive into these fights. We are about 30 minutes in now. Dang, time flies when you're talking WMMA.
4 fights in there?
Yes, sir. Do you want to start at the top of the card, start from the main event, and go down, or do we go backwards?
Oh, no, we start from the bottom and work our way to the main event.
Okay. Bottom to the main event. Victoria Leonardo versus Natalia Silva. This is Natalia Silva's third visit into the octagon. She's coming off of her 2 very clean, very impressive wins over Teresa Bleda and Jasmine Jasudavicius. Those
coming in as a big dog in that fight too.
Against JJ?
Yeah, because I remember JJ was going in as the favorite, and Natalia Silva was coming in. I believe
at a 200 underdog, at plus 200.
Who?
For
JJ?
No, for Natalia Silva.
For this fight?
No, for against Jasmine Jasudavicius.
Oh wow! For some reason, I thought she had came in as the dog.
Yeah, she was.
Oh,
the plus 200 underdog.
Oh, plus 200. Yeah, that's what I thought. And then because I remember there was a lot of hype around JJ on that one, and I remember watching that fight, and I was popping off for Natalia Silva.
Very fun fighter. Her style. Okay, if anybody has seen her first 2 fights or either of those fights, and say you forgot about it, and you're sitting down and watching this card and ready to kick it off, and you see Natalia Silva re-enter the cage, and you start to see her bounce and her kind of like her little bit of Taekwondo like style, you're going to recognize her right away. She's such a fun watch. The finishing sequence in the Teresa Bleda fight, when she kind of kicked, like the spinning back kick to the neck, it looked like, to the throat, just all up on the upper torso. She's a delight to watch, and she's going up against a girl in this fight, Victoria Leonardo, at 9-4, a little bit of a deceptive record. Her record's 9-4, and she's been fighting just as long as Natalia Silva. Victoria Leonardo has a more extensive amateur record. She's 8-2 as an amateur before she went pro. So their records are a lot more similar, and just by the numbers than you would think. And Victoria Leonardo has a lot more high level opposition that she's faced. Also, she's been in there with Manon Fiorot. She's been in there with Miranda Maverick, Erin Blanchfield. Erin Blanchfield head kicked her and finished her in Invicta, and that was kind of going to be where I was going to lead to, is that looking at her record and some of the fights that I've gone back and watched, it really looks like Victoria Leonardo is not a bad fighter, a bit of an all-arounder. I don't think her stand-up is good enough to go with Natalia Silva, or for what we've seen of Natalia Silva. You know, the eye test, if we're going to harken back to a well-known Fight Plug podcast term. But she really hasn't been able to put it together when she's faced some of the more notable or tougher competition throughout her career. Okay. And I think this is a pretty even test on paper. But I'm expecting Natalia Silva to ride the momentum that she's had so far, and hopefully give us another. Win or lose, just war exciting fight. Honestly, in this one, she's just so fun to watch.
I haven't been too familiar with Leonardo. So she has a win over Mandy Bohm, who we just discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Those losses, definitely were two, tough competition. So, I haven't seen her fight, so I can't. I mean, chances are I have seen her fight. I just don't remember.
Yeah,
But,
fair.
If I'm just going back, my quick glance, seems to be mostly wins by grappling, and
No wins by KO or TKO as far as I'm seeing in her career. One loss by KO TKO. So she doesn't win them like that. Oh, excuse me, 3 losses by KO TKO. 2 in the UFC and 1 in Invicta. So.
And Natalia Silva's good enough to be able to stop the takedowns. She's gonna move too. Not gonna sit there and rest. She's gonna force the scramble. So if Leonardo can't get that fight to the ground, it's gonna be possibly a long night. I'm honestly surprised this fight actually isn't higher up on the card. I thought it deserved to be at least on, the regular prelims.
Deserve to be, absolutely. I think the UFC knows what they potentially have with Natalia Silva, but I also think
I don't think they do, because I think if they did, she wouldn't be this low on her third fight. After the performances she's put on. So, I think with a good finish here, it could definitely be her launch into the kind of prelim headliner, potentially even main card spot for her next fight. So I think they do have somebody that could potentially be a big star for them as well. Fantastic fighter, and sorry to Leonardo, but obviously my pick is Natalia Silva. But it should be a fun fight. I'm hoping Leonardo comes out and proves me wrong too. So,
I don't hope she proves you wrong at all, but that's us being like expressing our bias for sure. All in on Natalia Silva, absolutely. And I think that this early card placement, because I'm there with you. A lot of times I'll see that and I'll be like, really? This person's on the prelims? Like, they should be main card. But, I mean, it also means more people are potentially going to see her fight. Oh, no, excuse me. Never mind. Screw that. This isn't a pay-per-view. I forget. This is just a fight night. So, yeah, you're right. Higher billing, for sure. I guess this is one of those situations, too, where, like we mentioned, there's 4 WMMA fights on the card, so they kind of figured, you can really see how they decided, let's spread them out a little bit. Let's give some people some breathers between these WMMA fights. Bad enough a lot of people use WMMA fights as a breather. That's like a lot of people's opportunity to go and fucking grab a taco or grab a beer and stuff, but
taco?
Go assemble a taco. Tacos aren't generally just all made up on a tray. You got to go throw your tortilla on the comal and get your meat going and your toppings and stuff.
But no, if you've never seen Natalia Silva fight, definitely check this fight out. It's early on the card, so be sure you catch it.
You know what? Honestly, it's the first women's fight on the card, but if I had to tell our listeners, like, listen, there's 4 WMMA fights on this card, but if you only watch one, watch Natalia Silva. I think if for nothing else, like, it has the least amount of I guess it has the least amount of stakes, like, in terms of where they both stand in their division and what this is going to do for them, in terms of getting closer to a title shot or anything like that. But in pure entertainment value, if Natalia goes out and has a similar performance as her last 2, or if she does what we're hoping that she's going to do, this one is going to be the most entertaining one of the night, I think. And it might be one-sided, but I mean, war a close fight too, I don't mind, but I enjoy a nice one-sided fight once in a while too.
My pick is Silva by TKO.
Same. I'll go there. I'll go second round for her also, but that's also probably just my verdict. Yeah. Fucking second round tech.
Second round is a good one. It's a good round.
Karolina Kowalkiewicz is ready to get back in the stage with Vanessa Demopoulos. Vanessa Demopoulos is. Let me pull up her record right now. I think she's 2-0 in the UFC. She is 3-0 in the UFC. Stand corrected. She started off her UFC run with an impressive come from behind win over Silvana Gomez Juarez, Silvana La Malvada. That was a pretty entertaining one because Silvana decked her really early on in the fight and dropped her with a punch, and it looked like she was going to go in for the finish, and she ended up scoring an armbar off of her back. Very, very impressive. Like, you don't see too many of those anymore in the UFC. That's desperation. That's a desperation submission nowadays, and she has a few of those. I went back and watched her fight with Sam Hughes back in Invicta, and she scored a reverse triangle in a fight that, not Invicta, in LFA, in a fight that she was behind in the cards. It was a good fight, but if that had managed to go to decision, she was probably going to be losing that fight in round 4. Yeah, she got an inverted triangle choke, and it put Sam Hughes to sleep. So she has crafty submissions. She's very, very athletic. She is a former stripper, and I'm not bringing that up for any perverted reasons or anything like that, but I mean, she's got a body on her for sure. It doesn't surprise me to hear that.
Into Joe Rogan's arms?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for her fight celebration, when Rogan and Bisping come into the cage, she likes to jump into her arms to do her interviews. Smart. Gets her a lot of attention. I mean, you remembered her because of that just now, so can't even hate on her for that.
When you brought it up, I was like, okay, yeah, I remember that.
Okay, I brought it up, but
going against
to assess, yeah, she's going in there, getting in there with a veteran, with much more experience than her. KK finally snapped her. What was it? A 5-fight losing streak.
It's a resurgence of Carolina that's going on right now.
Yeah, she
on a 2-fight win streak.
Yeah, from 2018 to 2021. Karolina Kowalkiewicz dropped 5 fights in a row. Now, they were all to top competition, to be fair. Jessica Andrade.
Champ, fighting for a belt, fought for a belt. And Michelle Waterson's questionable.
Yeah, a little bit more of a middling competition, but Jessica Panay in there. I mean, Jessica Panay was a former title challenger, too.
She lost to Johanna, Claudia.
That
was prime Claudia, too. So.
Yeah, Yan Xiaonan, who... I mean, up until like yesterday, was looking like she might possibly jump in front of Amanda Lemos for a strawweight title shot. So,
and also, let's not forget one of the fighters that also has a win over Rose.
Who?
KK.
You're talking about KK? Oh yeah, going way far back. I thought you were talking about her opponents that she lost to, and I was like, oh, okay, we're really pulling in the MMA math. But yeah, no, she has a 2016 win over Rose Namajunas.
Yeah, so she's got this resurgence going on. There's actually a bit of a period of time where I actually could have swore she retired for a bit. And then I remember she came back with that Felice Herrig fight, and she had announced it like 2 weeks prior to the fight. And I was like, oh shit, like, KK's back, and looked amazing in that fight. I think I called that fight on Verdict, and that fight alone got me like 11,000 points. And then
did you call it by submission? Because of the rear naked choke? Yeah.
And I was like something like less than 1% or something of people predicted that.
Fuck.
And then came off that pretty solid win off of Silvana. So this is definitely good matchmaking, I feel.
I do too. A girl with a lot of experience, newfound momentum, kind of trying to potentially go on her last run, as ridiculous as that feels to say. But ultimately a girl who is on the wrong side of 35 and more likely, closer to her way out. And then versus a girl who is undefeated in the UFC, 3 fights in. Excuse me, I don't know. I keep reverting back to 2, and more on the way up. And I do think that this is pretty even matchmaking, because I can see it go both ways. Truly, I really don't know what's going to happen in this fight.
I honestly think Um, I guess we both have two grappler dominant fighters here. So if I'm looking at just based off who's grappled with who and kind of the levels of competition and the levels of kind of control and everything, like I favor Carolina. Um, I don't know how good Demopoulos' grappling actually is. A split decision over Jinyu Fry doesn't really move my needle too much on where you kind of stand in the division on that.
Hater. Former Invictus strawweight champion.
And so, maybe this is one of those fights where she comes out and this is kind of like that first big name that kind of launches her into that top kind of 15 kind of position. But, Carolina's coming in. She really has looked solid in a 3-round fight. If this was a 5-round fight, I'd probably favor Demopoulos. So this was a 3-round fight. Carolina is a smart fighter. She's always had a good fight IQ.
She got smarter, for sure.
She knows, that she definitely changed camps. She moved to Florida. She's with Top Team now. And she definitely fights a lot. She fights a lot smarter fight. And so, they're definitely preparing for this fight. And,
And Carolina brought her dogs with her to Florida this time around, dude. New mythical fighter. Carolina Kowalkiewicz in Florida with her fucking dogs. With her dog. That might be a new level of motivation unlocked right there.
No, but I think if I'm looking at this fight just based on paper and you had to ask me who I'm going with, I'm going to go with Carolina by sub. And this is just based off of all my knowledge of Carolina and the fights she's had. Maybe it's just going with that veteran type of, she's been in there with some of the best, but
can't discount veteranship. That is for sure.
I just think that since switching to Top Team, the kind of game plan and how they've kind of got her to use what she does best, like in the fights, which is kind of use some striking to set up all those grappling kind of exchanges, takedowns, scrambles, and stuff to get into those positions for the sub. I just think she's going to come in, probably get that sub. But, I don't know.
Yeah. I think she's in really good hands down there at American Top Team with Coach Bahupa. Yeah. I think he's really turned her around, given her a lot more confidence, and also kind of made her realize, like you mentioned, that she has a much better grappling or submission grappling game than people were giving her credit for. She was known much more as a striker for most of her career, and she's really been getting it done with her grappling these past two fights. I have to say though, going back and looking at her record and seeing where she's used it, and I know it's a little bit hypocritical to say she's just realizing that she has these grappling chops now, and then I'm also going to come back and say, she's never really submitted anybody worth of note. Sure. There's that, but who knows? This could be her really starting to find out and realize that she has those cards in her deck. I do think that this is going to be with Vanessa Demopoulos, though. I think that's a tough one to prove it against, as improved as KK's grappling is starting to be. I just feel like I've seen Vanessa Demopoulos pull off some pretty creative subs, and she's done it under pressure. She's done it when she's been behind on the cards. She's done it when she's been rocked. That tells me a lot about her ability to be clutch when it comes to grappling and turning things around in a fight. That doesn't make me automatically assume that she's going to beat KK with wrestling or sub her, but I think I'm going to give the edge to Demopoulos on the ground, and if it stays standing, I'll give the edge to Carolina, but she still doesn't move her head enough, man. She still kind of keeps that. That's one of her biggest flaws in the stand-up. She throws a lot of straight punches. You know, her striking is pretty clean. You know, I don't think people give her a lot of credit for her striking, because when she ends up to be when she turns up on the losing end of a striking match, it's been ugly a few times. But
yeah,
I think her hands are nice. I think that she probably will want to stay off the ground with Vanessa Demopoulos. Or if she does go to the ground with Vanessa Demopoulos, she cannot let Demopoulos get on top, because I think that's where Vanessa's going to use her superior athleticism, and I think she might be able to have a lot of top control or hold Carolina down and get the better of the ground exchanges. Because like I said, I didn't really get to lead into it, but when I mentioned she was a former stripper before, I wasn't just bringing that up just to bring it up, but I think that you really kind of see it in her athleticism. I don't know if you've ever seen her do any of this stuff where she's pretending like a heavy bag is like a pole, the way she's able to just like lift herself up with her legs and stuff. Like she's a prime athlete. Like she really has, you know, the athleticism, and I think if she knows how to use that and apply that in a fight, and to KK's credit, she has a really good scramble. Like she's not one to just like, oh, you got me down, and just surrender the position. Like she's fighting to get back up. She might not be the best defensive wrestler or scrambler in the world, but she is not giving you any time to rest. Like if you have yeah, she's going to be squirrely. So I think the ground game could be interesting. I'm going to give the edge to Vanessa Demopoulos there, and because of that issue with KK not moving her head enough in the stand-up, where it should be more her territory. I also know Vanessa Demopoulos has power. I'm gonna go Vanessa Demopoulos by decision, but I think it's gonna be a close fight. I think it's gonna be a really close one, and I'm pulling for KK. I want her to pull it out. I'm rooting for Carolina. I'd like to see her continued resurgence, but for this one, I think I'm leaning more towards Demopoulos.
That's fair. And like I said, I'm locking in KK by sub. Maybe. Yeah, I'm going to go with sub. I think she's going to out-grapple Demopoulos.
So moving on up into our main card edition of this episode, we have Emily Ducote versus Lupi Godinez. Okay, real talk. Have you ever seen Emily Ducote fight? Or you saw her fight Angela Hill, right?
Yeah, I'm sure I have, but like I said, there's so many fights now that I'm sure I've seen a lot of guys fight and girls fight. I don't remember them.
I don't blame you at all. And Emily Ducote was not a girl who was on my radar before she came into the UFC, but when she did finally sign with the UFC and came in, I heard a lot of people in the WMMA world making a big deal of it, saying, "Oh, finally she's coming over to the UFC and she's going to do her thing." Former Invicta strawweight champion, but we've heard that before, haven't we? And looking at her record, not a lot of girls who I'm super familiar with outside of some of her losses. She has a couple. Oh, what are we doing, Tapology? Were you refreshing on me? I didn't hit refresh.
Came in with her win over Penne.
Came in with a win over Penne.
Lost to Angela Hill.
Yeah, dropped a decision to Angela Hill, and a lot of people have. Back in the day, she's a couple losses to Alima Leigh McFarlane. Canceled fight with... That's far enough in the back. There's no point even referencing it. I'll just skip ahead to say that it's Lupi Godinez's fight to lose. Like, it's that we've seen her go in there, and she also has a loss to Angela Hill, which I think is interesting. Angela Hill's fighting on the main event of this card, and she has the two girls who recently lost to her locking horns on the main card. It really all comes down to what Lupita Godinez shows up. Is she going to wrestle? Is she going to do what she's actually fucking good at? And I can't tell when that girl is going to show up, because there were times where I thought, okay, it's when Lupi Godinez decides to take a short notice fight, and that's when she shows up and says, I'm just going to be a little Tasmanian devil and I'm not going to wrestle, I'm just going to fight. That's not the case in her last fight. It wasn't a short notice fight from what I can remember, and she didn't wrestle. I thought that should have been a really good feather in her cap to be able to get a win over Hill. Hill, we've been critical of Hill, but she's you really can't argue that she's improved. I mean, she was very, very close to being a 500 fighter for a minute there. Her record is very, very deceptive, but credit to her, man. She's been in there with some of the best girls. I mean, I keep going back and I keep fading Amanda Lemos because, in my opinion, I honestly thought she lost her fight to Angela Hill. Yeah. But anyways, now I'm talking too much about Angela Hill.
We'll get to that one too.
Yeah, Lupe Godinez, Emily Ducote. Give me your breakdown. And this should have been. Sorry, by the way, this should have been Emily Ducote versus Polyana Viana. Was the original fight slated for this one? So, Lupe Godinez, filling in on relatively short notice. I mean, like about 2 weeks' notice for Lupe Godinez. So, there's that. That's a factor too. But sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, so I didn't know that. I thought this fight was scheduled out for months, but I think you bring up a good point because in the Angela, or even going back before that, with some of her fights in the UFC where she looked really, really good coming in, looked really solid, and then she had that fight with Angela Hill, and it was a frustrating fight because she kind of refused to wrestle in that fight, and I definitely felt that was a fight that Lupe should have won. Actually should be on a 4-fight winning streak. So if she decides to show up and stick to that game plan, then I think this is definitely, like I said, this is just a potential coming out party for her. Kind of be launched into that top 10 kind of space in the women's division. But if she comes out and decides to kind of throw the game plan out the window, I think it could be a long night for her. She's coming off the win on Calvillo. I know it's a split decision, and I like Cynthia Calvillo. I've always been a fan of hers. But Lupe didn't look that impressive in that win against Calvillo.
No.
And I felt that was a fight that they were giving Lupe to kind of come out and kind of showcase her skills. And I felt she kind of fell short on that one, even though she still won.
She didn't capitalize on the opportunity because that was a glue factory fight for Cynthia Calvillo at that point. Yeah.
And then if I look at Ducote, I'm sorry, I messed that up. Like you said, Angela Hill, that's a decision loss to Angela Hill. I don't know how she has the win over Penne, and then that lost to Hill.
She's an all-arounder.
I feel like she's an all-arounder that doesn't excel at really anything. Kind of just that, solid, kind of everywhere, but no real crazy threat as well.
Yeah. And to anybody listening who might be saying, you guys don't know what this girl's style is, dude. You're not very familiar with it. That's true. But I've gone back. I've watched both of her UFC fights at this point. I've gone back, watched a pretty good amount of her highlights from before the UFC, and intently watching, like, what is your style, girl? You are just a fighter. You are, which isn't bad. It's great to be well-rounded. I think some of the best people in this sport are just well-rounded. You don't always have to be a specialist, but sometimes it does help to break down a fight. That does tend to be where it's like, dude, when we're trying to figure out who's going to have the upper hand in this scenario and then in this scenario, when you're just an all-arounder, it's kind of tough. You have to start kind of looking at who has more 5-round experience, who has more top level, who had the better strength of schedule, who has more heart, and those aren't things you can always measure as much as you can go back and be like, well, she has this many wins by by submission over these people. It's just not as conclusive sometimes.
But
and if the Lupi Godinez who fought Ariane Carnelossi shows up, which I know you didn't watch that fight, that was the day of your son's baptism. I was watching that fight in my car outside the church. That's how down for WMMA I was. That was the perfect Lupi Godinez fight. That was full on wrestling, doing what she should do, and she just manhandled Ariane Carnelossi, who looked like she had been to every pharmacist in Brazil. But yeah, those are two bite-sized fighters right there, and Lupi put it on her in that fight. If we get that version of Lupi Godinez, I think she's going to handle Emily Ducote. So yeah.
So I guess if I have to lock in my pick right now, I'm going to lock in Lupi by decision. I think she's got the cardio. Lupi does carry a pretty fast pace.
Yeah.
So she's definitely going to put that pressure on Ducote. And yeah, this is pretty high up on the card too. I think it's on the main kind of prelim portion of the card.
Yeah, what some would call the showcase fight, or is it the showcase fight? I always forget the terminology, but yeah, third to last, right in the middle of the main card.
I think both fighters potentially fighting to get into the top 15. I could be wrong on that.
Pull up them rankings, boy.
Please check real fast.
Don't give me your you don't need to fill time here. We don't need any of that.
No, it looks like both of them are fighting to make the top 15 right now. So, yeah, it's going to be a good fight. But locking in Lupi by decision. Hopefully that 2-week notice thing isn't too big of a deal, but it makes me feel she's going to come in and do what she knows. And that is grappling and walk out with the win. So,
looking at their builds right now, to kind of like see what the height and reach advantage or disadvantage might look like. Very, very, very close. They're both 29 years old, both 5'2", which if you would have asked me, I would have thought that Emily Ducote was a bit taller than Lupita Godinez, but it has them listed here as 5'2", which whenever I see that two fighters are the same height, I always intently look at them when they're facing off to see if they're just wrong, because a lot of times they really are just super wrong. Like the wrong stat or the wrong measurement will just get posted and then copied by a bunch of websites and a lot of times no one changes it. But 2-inch reach advantage for Emily Ducote, 63-inch reach to 61-inch reach. And I wanted to, the reason I pulled that up actually is because there was that stat going around when Lupita Godinez was going into the Cynthia Calvillo fight that Lupita Godinez never beats anybody more than like 2 inches taller than her. I think that was the case, and Cynthia Calvillo was the only time she was able to buck that trend. But that's not going to apply here because it has them both listed at 5'2". But on the night when we're watching this card, if I see Emily Ducote looking down at Lupita Godinez because somebody fumbled the numbers, I may be reaching for my verdict score and considering changing it. Not really though. I think even if this fight stays standing, I think Lupita Godinez has a pretty healthy shot at this. I don't think it's necessarily you take it down or you lose type of situation. It was a too close for comfort fight against Cynthia Calvillo, and I know some people that thought that Calvillo should have won that. I don't agree. It's nice to be able to get a UD. Nobody ever wants to fall back on a split decision, but I think that like you mentioned, that pressure that she brings, I think she might be able to parlay that into making Emily Ducote make mistakes, put her back on the cage, and just kind of overwhelm her a bit, because Lupita Godinez, if nothing else, has shown us that she has no problem fighting under these bright lights. She's as game as they come, well known for coming in on short notice and taking fights and always wanted to stay busy. I think she's definitely has the mentality for this game. She just needs to Yeah, someone in your camp needs to sit her down and be like, "This is the game plan for this fight. Please do it." For sure. So yeah, we're both in on Lupita Godinez, and we can now move on to our WMMA main event of the evening. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu ace Mackenzie Dern returning to face Angela Hill, Unkillable Hill. Like we mentioned before, there was, and still now even, she's only 3 fights away from being a 500 fighter with a record of 15-12. Angela Hill's record, and this is not me going off on Angela Hill. I really don't want to turn this podcast into a really cynical one where we're like shitting on fighters. That'll probably happen, but that's not the intent right off the bat. But Angela Hill's had a bad record for as long as I've been watching WMMA. Like once I really started tuning into WMMA, because I've had my favorite fighter has been a WMMA fighter for a while now, and that was Joanna. Just a little history of our background with WMMA, but that still doesn't necessarily mean I was like a big WMMA fan. I just liked her, but it wasn't until you kind of really start to dive in and be like, okay, well, I'm not just going to be this fan that's like, well, I stand this fighter and fuck everyone else, and I'm just going to keep picking them until they lose. You want to start to kind of like look at the landscape and consider the matchups that they might be facing, and that happened more when Joanna actually finally lost her title, and I had to start thinking like, okay, who are some of these girls that she might have to fight to get back in there? Now, we know how history went. We know Joanna didn't have to fight anybody to get back into those title shots. She had a few fights, but she wasn't going back in the division to face off against anybody like Angela Hill. But that's when I first took notice of Angela Hill. And I believe when I first, let me pull up her record right now. When I first
9-10 in the UFC.
Started paying attention. She's 9-10 in the UFC. She still has a losing record if you're only counting her UFC fights. Jesus. But when I first kind of started to take note or notice Angela Hill, I think she was like 8-5. So yeah, the record didn't get a whole lot better, but she has been on the wrong side of some decisions that as much as I was picking against her, and I've always been picking against her, to be honest, I thought, to my surprise, I thought she would, and I mentioned this earlier, I thought she beat Amanda Lemos. It was a close fight, and I'm not like, robbery that, that they gave it to Amanda Lemos, but like I said, that has always been something since then that has made me kind of elevate or look at Angela Hill with a new set of eyes a little bit and be like, well, she survived Amanda Lemos. She was in there. She had something for that attack, and we've seen Amanda Lemos go berserker and put Marina Rodriguez away, and then also, it's made me fade Amanda Lemos. So, but I guess I'm kind of like meandering here in terms of where I stand with Angela Hill. She's coming off of that win with Emily Ducote, and she's coming off two wins over Ducote and Lupi Godinez, like I mentioned. Before that, she dropped 3 in a row to Virna Jandiroba. Close fight. Amanda Lemos, another close fight. Tisha Torres, another close fight. I had Tisha in that one. And she did lose that one. So, she's getting in there with Mackenzie Dern. 5-round fight. We all know what Mackenzie Dern brings to the table. We all know what she doesn't bring to the table, and that is wrestling or any means of practically getting the fight to the ground, where she has a very, very clear advantage. A big frustrating point for anybody who's a fan of Mackenzie Dern, I'm sure. And she probably has a lot of fans for more reasons than her fighting, to be honest, and I'm not even holding that against her. Mackenzie Dern is a beautiful woman, man, and that's probably why she's in this main event. Because, like we mentioned, if it had to be a WMMA fight in the main event, some of the other ones could have been contenders here, I guess. But both of these girls looking to cement themselves into some kind of contendership role here. Meanwhile, the top of the division is still in flux. We just got that Yan Xiaonan versus Amanda Lemos announcement for the strawweight division. Both of these girls want to have their name at the tip of people's tongues to be in consideration for their. Is this kind of a one-sided deal, though? Is it a situation where even if Angela Hill pulls off this, let me see if I should even call it an upset. Excuse me. It'll take me a little bit to pull that up, but she should be an underdog.
A considerable underdog.
Is this one of those deals where if Mackenzie Dern wins, she'll be in consideration to be a contender, but not necessarily the same if Angela Hill wins, or do you think the UFC's finally ready to be like, hey, let's take this Angela Hill a little bit more seriously and not just use her as mid-card fodder?
Mackenzie Dern's currently number 8. Angela Hill's number 14. Honestly, if you're asking me how this fight's gonna go, I mean, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I don't think there's really much to break down. It's gonna be Dern by sub. I just think with Hill, everybody knows what you're getting with Hill. You're not getting someone that you gotta worry about being finished with. You don't have the one-shot power.
Yep, she doesn't check. She does not check that box.
She's not gonna out grapple Mackenzie Dern. I can tell you that much. Her best hope is to keep it on the feet and hoping that either Mackenzie Dern obliges a stand-up fight for 5 rounds, or is just able to stop all the takedowns. I don't think cardio is going to be a factor for either woman. They can both go 5 rounds, I believe. But honestly, it's just a matter of time before Mackenzie Dern gets it to the ground, and Angela Hill just doesn't have that. She's not on the same level of grappling that Mackenzie Dern is. And so I think the second the fight hits the ground, be it in the first round or late in the fight in the 4th or 5th, if it's kind of one of those, I think the second it hits the ground, that's the beginning of the end for Angela Hill. I mean, who's Mackenzie Dern? Who's Mackenzie Dern lost to?
Yan Xiaonan and Marina Rodriguez. And further back, Amanda Hibas.
So, you're comparing one fighter whose losses are of kind of like a higher tier of fighters compared to Angela Hill, who's
sounds like MMA
currently number
math
14
to me.
But I mean, you can call it MMA math, but I think at the end of the day, I guess I don't mean it. I don't mean it with any disrespect, but I see Mackenzie Dern versus the UFC WMMA textbook definition of journey woman.
Oh, I could. I'll buy that.
Angela Hill, on any given night could come in and decision, anybody, and it would be one of those things where I don't think I'd be surprised if like, oh well, shit, like Angela Hill showed up tonight, but I don't think this is going to be one of those nights. So I think the fight does hit the floor eventually, be it in the 1st or the 4th. I think they're trying to. I think Mackenzie Dern, is what did I say? She was number 8 right now.
Yeah.
So I don't think a win here necessarily gets you closer to the shot, but what I do think it does is it is the main event. And especially with the sub win, I think it kind of puts you back on track to get that top 5 fight and potentially be maybe 2 fights away from another title shot. I think if she comes in and gets a finish here this weekend, I think she most definitely should have a call out ready.
That's what I was going to get to.
For this weekend as well, she does.
And I'm looking at the rankings right now. If she gets a highlight reel, like return to form submission, like some real slick submission that's going to win submission of the night over Angela Hill on a main event, no less, she's got she needs to call out 2 names very, very hard, or one of 2 names. She needs to go hard for Thug Rose Namajunas or Carla Esparza. Like, call them out hard, especially right now, because Rose Namajunas is taking a bunch of grappling matches outside of MMA. And it's, I'm not going to turn this into a shit on Rose like fest or anything. I can very easily. We all know her penchant for taking time away from the sport. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a built-in storyline there. It's like, hey, you think you're an ace at grappling? You're here to do this. Come do it in the cage. This is where you belong. Or former 2-time champion Carla Esparza. That should be easy work. Where Carla wants to take the fight exactly where Mackenzie Dern wants it to be. So I mean that could also turn into a fucking horrible boxing like stand-up fight, but I think those are the names that she would definitely want to call out right off the bat if she gets this
win. If you're calling somebody out, those are probably the names you definitely want to shout at. I don't think she's gonna get those fights though.
I mean, I'm looking
I think
at
realistically, I think her next fight is probably gonna be Jessica Andrade. So.
That would be interesting if Jessica Andrade is going to stick around. That's a very fun fight. Also, I'm so
is because it's
for
your
that
classic
fight.
Kind of striker versus grappler. You have Andrade coming off of 2 in a row now for the first time, I want to say, and Andrade is in the top 5. I don't think, like I said, if you call out number 1 and number 2, I don't think you're going to get that with a win over Angela Hill. But I do think you get someone like Jessica Andrade with that. John DeRoba just had a fight, so I don't. Maybe they kind of have a.
They already fought too, so yeah.
But they have already fought too, so that could go out the window. But right now, for me, if she were to win, Andrade makes the most sense in terms of you have a former champ, top 5, that's probably on the decline, versus an up-and-comer that is still looking kind of for that big-name win on the resume to be like, okay, I'm a legit threat for this championship belt.
Yeah. Allow me to move backwards just a little bit, because I actually haven't really given a full breakdown on this, because that word keeps coming up. If because we're already matchmaking for Mackenzie Dern for if she gets this win, and I think that it's important to really highlight that if, because I'm kind of leaning towards Angela Hill in this one, which might be the first time I've ever picked her. My reasoning, though, is just like going back and looking at Mackenzie Dern and seeing the body of work that she's put together in some of her more recent fights, or most recent fights. She's getting in there. She got the win over Tisha Torres, but I think she should be 0-3 in her last 3 fights right now. She had Yan Xiaonan on the ground for extended periods of time, wasn't able to get those submissions. Same with Tisha Torres. Tisha Torres showed a great scramble and was having none of it. Like I said, I thought Tisha Torres won that fight. Marina Rodriguez, who we saw Virna Jandiroba just absolutely pummel and control and put away. Or did she put away? Was that a finish in that fight? I don't recall. Was it a submission?
I think it was submission late. I could be wrong. I don't know.
Either way, yeah. Virna Jandiroba took it to Marina Rodriguez in a way that Mackenzie Dern was not able to. She lost to Mackenzie. It was a decision. But these are 3 fights where before any of them happened, or before if I didn't know the results of any of them, or if we're talking like 2020, 2021 Mackenzie Dern, if you would have been like, okay, break down how it would look if she fought the following girls: Marina Rodriguez, Tisha Torres, Yan Xiaonan. I would say if she could take them down, she should be able to, like you were saying, she should be able to fucking fold these girls up into a pretzel. Like, it's game over. It's, if Mackenzie Dern gets you down, it's lights. That hasn't been the case. Most surprisingly was Marina Rodriguez that she survived with her. I was rooting for Rodriguez in that fight, but I was also very worried for her because I thought, like, dude, if she doesn't have any grappling, and she survived with her on the ground. I feel like this what's the word I'm looking for? Just this mythological level of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that we've kind of like applied to Mackenzie Dern, which she's shown in spurts. She's definitely shown that she can do that with some it hasn't quite been there. And now, Could I be proven wrong against Angela Hill? Absolutely. If she gets Angela Hill down, gets her in a bad position early in any round, she could certainly return to form and show us that she can still do that. But if I can trust Angela Hill to do anything, it's stay on that bike and move laterally. Don't be there for her, because Mackenzie Dern has no way of getting a fight to the ground. I've described it as jazz wrestling before. She just wants to put her hands on you and just try and turn it into a takedown by whatever means necessary. No matter how sloppy or ridiculous it works, she's like an octopus. She has no real game plan, or it's not wrestling, it's not judo, it's just I just need to put my hands on you and get you down. I think Angela Hill knows that. I think Angela Hill's seen her do that to other girls, and Angela Hill's looking at looking at Yan Xiaonan's performance against her and Tisha Torres and saying, I'm every bit of, at the very least, I'm every bit as athletic as those girls. I have the cardio to go 5 rounds, and I think that I think she can do that. I'm leaning towards Angela Hill for the first time. Like I said, not going to be surprised at all if round 2 she's tapping to a rear naked choke. That's always going to be in play with Mackenzie Dern. Honestly, I saw Angela Hill do a very, very good Dominic Cruz impression one time, and that is, ever since then, it has made me recognize that she has better footwork than I've been giving her credit for. She doesn't got the power. She doesn't always have the best game planning. She's not a standout wrestler or grappler or any of that. But she, I really do think she could stay on her bike, stick and move laterally, and just and if she takes it the distance, I think Mackenzie Dern is potentially going to start fading, especially if she's able to completely fend off takedowns. Because the thing is, if there's instances where Mackenzie Dern's going to get a girl down and she hasn't been able to get those subs, but what we end up seeing is it gives her an opportunity to rest and kind of recharge, because she's always going to be in control on the ground. Other girls are just surviving. If Angela Hill can defend all takedowns for 2.5 rounds, that's taking away a lot of time for Mackenzie Dern to breathe and kind of like recalibrate and rest a little bit. And I think it could start potentially looking really ugly if we start to get into a late 3rd, 4th, 5th round where Mackenzie Dern's only been able to get like a couple takedowns with not much control time. That's also a big if, though. That's also a big if.
Very big if you ask me.
Yeah. And there's also the factor that it is 5 rounds. I think that does favor Mackenzie Dern. Ultimately, it just gives her more room to work, because I don't think Angela Hill's going to get a finish here. If I'm picking Angela Hill, it's going to be by decision. And it's more time in this fight where she needs to be perfect. I think I'm still going to go with Angela Hill there, just for parity. But fuck it, Interesting that we ended up with different picks for our first main event. Really excited to see how it's going to go, and see which one of us is going to have to eat crow on the episode 2.
This far still, just know that if you decide to go with Kenny on this one, you're probably going to lose.
Oh, is that right? Okay, yeah.
You know what the fuck you're smoking?
see how it goes. Like I said, dude, she went in there. If Mackenzie Dern had to fight Amanda Lemos, I think Amanda Lemos is going to put Mackenzie Dern in a box, dude. And Angela Hill went in there with Amanda Lemos, and I know different styles, but Lemos wasn't able to do that with Hill. So yeah, she needs to just get on her bike, stay on her bike, and have Mackenzie Dern huffing and puffing later on. I think Mackenzie Dern has too many distractions now too. See, you're making me try and reinforce my pick now, because I don't know. I think she's got that divorce on her mind and all of that. We're gonna get into that. She's got that going. She was talking about how things have been crazy in her life right now, and that how booking a fight, getting an opportunity to get back in there, provides a good distraction against all of that. And I didn't hear any difference in her accent, by the way, in that video that you shared.
I mean, it's been a long time since I heard her talk, but I didn't even hear an accent. So.
Yeah. So yeah, fortune favors the bold, my friend. I'm going Angela Hill by decision. And that wraps up. That concludes our breakdown of UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Hill. Doesn't necessarily mean the show needs to be over, although we are at 1 minute and 22 seconds. But any other notable WMMA news? I guess we should touch on the fact that we mentioned it a little earlier in the show. Amanda Lemos versus Zhang Weili is booked for UFC 291, I believe it is. So that's going down. I'm fucking happy for it. It was really looking like after Yan Xiaonan pulled off this fight, this knockout win over Jessica Andrade, a lot of people thought Yan Xiaonan was going to skip over Amanda Lemos and get that shot, which I wouldn't have been surprised if that was the case. I thought that was going to move. I thought that was going to be the move they were going to make. I thought that they might be aiming for maybe a big fight in China, although I don't know what the situation is with the UFC at this current time, or if a fight in China is something that they could even put together, to make that fight happen in time. So it looks like they're going to put that one in their back pocket right now. Go with Amanda Lemos. And I'm not going to ask you to make an official pick, but what are your initial thoughts for that fight? Who are you kind of favoring early? Would you have rather that they had done Zhang Weili versus Yan Xiaonan? What do you think about that?
I'm surprised that she got it, but honestly, I don't think the fight is going to happen. They announced it too far in advance. Somebody's going to get hurt. It's going to change. So,
Gadzooks, you'd put the bad juju on that fight. Damn.
You don't announce fights that. There is a reason why you don't announce fights that far off. So I don't even think that fight's going to end up happening. So, I mean, I think the closer it gets, the more I'd kind of be interested in like breaking that down. But as of right now, I'm like, this fight's probably not even going to happen. I have a feeling there's too much money on for the Weili Yan fight, and I just think somebody's going to get hurt, and they're just going to rework it to a China card, and you have that big fight. No disrespect to Amanda Lemos, but I don't think she's really moving the needle on that title fight either. So we'll see.
It's fair. I'm looking at it right now. It's 292 actually. I was wrong. I said 291 earlier. So even a bit later than I was thinking. Although August 19th, 2023, we are in May. So almost 3 months to the day. I don't think it's really that far in advance. It does feel pretty far in advance because nowadays the UFC doesn't do anything to push a card.
A month ahead of time, unless it's something fucking massive, bro.
There's been a few, and that card is pretty massive. I mean, let me pull it up. Not the fight itself, the card, UFC 292 Boston. That one, I believe, is what they're shooting for Sterling and O'Malley. Yes, so far that card has Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley, Weili Zhang versus Amanda Lemos, and Cody Garbrandt versus Mario Bautista. But we are not going to put we're not going to talk about any of that other stuff. But yeah, I think it's a little bit of a pick'em for me right now. I think on paper, I do favor Zhang Weili. I do think that she should be able to put a game plan together that complements her strengths and puts Amanda Lemos in positions that she doesn't necessarily want to be in. I think she has more tools in her toolbox, but Amanda Lemos, we've seen, definitely has that difference-making power. And Weili Zhang, she can be sucked into a brawl. We've seen it happen. We saw it happen with Joanna. She pulled her, and she's matured since then. That was a 3-year-old fight now. That I'm referencing. Although that is a very entertaining version of Weili Zhang also. But I think that she'll definitely want to keep away from that style of fight with Amanda Lemos. Keep her back off of the cage. Don't let Amanda Lemos start to unload on those big hooks and haymakers, because for as multifaceted as Zhang Weili is, notice I keep going back and forth between calling her Weili Zhang and Zhang Weili. I honestly I don't know which is right anymore. It's pretty interchangeable for me. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, for as multifaceted as Weili Zhang is, we've seen her put out. We've seen her get knocked out before by Rose Namajunas. And like I said, we know that it's possible to draw her into a brawl. So Amanda Lemos is as live a dog as they come in this fight. And I'm just excited to see somebody new challenge for this strawweight title, because for years now, it has been nobody but Joanna, Rose, Carla, Weili Zhang, and Jessica. It's just been those girls. So this is the first new challenger at strawweight that we've seen in a meaningful amount of time, for sure. So glad they did. I mean, and it also would have been a new challenger if they went with Yan Xiaonan. So good to know that if this fight falls apart, like you're worried that it might. Either way, we'll get some fresh faces. You are on some Chael Sonnen type of prediction, by the way. But no, the fight's not happening. Just what the fuck, dude?
I'm sorry. It's not. We're gonna come back to this in like 3 months too. So we'll replay this clip.
Yeah, we'll do that for sure. I will pull it. We'll make a short out of it, and I'll be like fucking Mike Stradamus over here, dude. Just straight up. That reminds me of Chael Sonnen just predicting for no reason whatsoever and getting it right that John Jones and Anthony Rumble Johnson just wasn't going to happen. The fight had been booked. There was already promo and stuff, and I think somebody asked him that in a Q&A or something like that. He was, what do you think about the John Jones versus Anthony Rumble fight? Not happening. Next question.
This feels like a placeholder until they figure something out. And I don't know, but we'll see in a couple months.
Right on. Well, man, I think that's a great place to wrap it up. Good first episode. I hope we were able to keep on it and do it weekly. But just to let people know, there may be some weeks where we just don't put out a WMMA episode. It's really going to depend mostly on how many fights? Yeah, because oftentimes, like, we're usually lucky to get one or two. This card,
normally two a card.
Yeah, this one we're blessed with four. There, I don't recall the last time there was straight up no WMMA fights. I think there's always at least one. Usually,
there's always at least one. Yeah, I can't think of the last time there was none.
Yeah, but if that one or even multiple happen to be above the flyweight division, we're talking bantamweights and featherweights, straight up, we might not cover it. But maybe we might come around to a time when we will. Certainly not for featherweight. Bantamweight, if the title's on the line, if the match, obviously we're going to cover Nunes versus Aldana for sure. But yeah, there's above flyweight, it's pretty rough for WMMA. We're both, well, I shouldn't lump you into this, but I've been saying for a while, my prediction actually, because Brandon and I did predictions for like who's going to be the champion on the first day of next year and all of that. I predicted that by January 1st 2024 the featherweight division will be no more, whether they dissolve it or whether they just force the couple girls that they have fighting there to move down to bantamweight. I'm not sure. That's pretty cynical of me. I guess I don't really hope that happens, but I kind of hope that happens. Either way, just to give people an idea of of how frequent we'll be releasing episodes in this format. If there's notable WMMA news and one or two fights, hey, we'll come through with it. We'll talk about that news. We'll cover those fights. But just don't be surprised if there's a few weeks missing here and there, because all we have to work with is what the MMA blood gods give us as far as WMMA in the octagon.
I usually watch Invicta. I'll catch it on YouTube for free. So if there's anything, they usually have cards like once every couple months. So might cover some stuff there. But
yeah. Or when Stamp Fairtex is doing her thing over in one, whenever she has fights coming up.
In different places. So that'll probably be around.
Yeah, and it's probably going to force us to broaden our horizons too. Because I was telling Brandon, I was like, as excited as I am to start this WMMA podcast with you, I can't say for certain that this means that I'm actually going to start watching Invicta or like.
Yeah, you never watch it every time I date.
I've pulled it up a few times and I do watch it, but man, I've pulled it up a few times when it's like, this is a rough watch.
I think you caught it that one time they didn't have any graphics or something.
Yes, yeah. Sometimes the production.
They don't have a timer or anything.
Sometimes the production can be, I'll call it less than. I don't want to punch down on Invicta. A lot of my favorite fighters, favorite WMMA fighters, come from Invicta, but it can be a little bit of a tough watch sometimes. I'm not here to try and sell people on the idea that all WMMA is underrated. But by the same token, not every men's MMA fight is fireworks, because I often hear that where some people, and not to turn this into a defend WMMA segment for this show right before I was about to wrap up, but a lot of times people really write it off, and the idea of just getting rid of the women's division is a not that people are even necessarily serious about it, but that's a very default, very accepted joke. And I always kind of want to retort and say, like, okay, you're telling me you've never seen a fucking awful men's fight? Like, they're not all bangers just because they're men. Like, let's take a peek at some of these middleweight and heavyweight fights, guys. Like, they're not all quality, but oftentimes we're just exposed to much, much more of it compared to women's fights. So, yeah. But we're here to carry the torch in that regard. So once again, let me start my outro spiel. Mike, thank you for joining me. This has been a really fun episode. If you, the listener, are still with us, thank you. You're dedicated. And I want you to let us know that you are listening to us by doing like a little timestamp code and leaving a comment and be like, yes, I was here listening this far into the episode. We'll shout you out in the comments. If you like this, I would say subscribe. Even if you don't like it, also subscribe, because we do a regular men's MMA podcast on this same channel every week. So stick around for all of that and much, much more. And we will see you next week.
Live vlogs coming, so.
To be determined. You mentioned your live vlog idea for... I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm not even going to say what for potentially. Don't make my mind wander right as I was literally about to say it. I will see you in the next one. You're like, live vlogs coming. It's like, fucking shit. You'd make me want to talk about it, dude. Jesus Christ. Way to derail me. Yeah, live. We have some vlogs coming, guys. Yeah, keep an eye out for that in 2025. Peace out, everybody. Have a good one.
Catch y'all later.